The Young and the Restless spoilers. The day of Heather's funeral was a somber, heavy affair. The air was thick with grief as friends, family, and even distant acquaintances gathered to pay their final respects. But none felt the loss more deeply than Daniel and his daughter, Lucy. They stood side by side, their faces pale and drawn, the weight of Heather's death pressing down on them with a force that felt unbearable. For weeks, Daniel had clung to hope, searching for answers, but now that hope had crumbled. Heather was truly gone, and the pain of that reality threatened to swallow him whole. Daniel had promised himself that after this funeral, after laying his wife to rest, he would find the truth. He would seek justice, no matter what it took. But as he stood there, his eyes fixed on the casket, he felt nothing but emptiness. The woman he loved, the mother of his child, had been brutally taken from him, and the void she left behind was impossible to fill. The ceremony was almost over when an unexpected figure appeared at the funeral, Sharon Newman. Her presence sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. No one had expected her to show up, especially not after she had been missing for weeks, hiding from the consequences of her actions. But there she was, her face streaked with tears, her eyes hollow with guilt and remorse. Sharon approached the front of the room, her steps slow and hesitant. She stopped before Heather's framed photo, the woman whose life she had ended, and stood there for what felt like an eternity. The silence in the room was deafening as everyone watched, waiting for her to say something, anything. But Sharon didn't speak right away. She simply stood there, gazing at the picture of Heather, her lips trembling. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said something that no one could hear. It was as though she was speaking directly to Heather, seeking forgiveness from the one person who could never give it. After a long moment, Sharon turned and began to walk away, her body trembling with the weight of her guilt. But before she could leave, the police arrived. Officers entered the room, their presence immediately causing a stir among the mourners. Daniel's heart skipped a beat as he watched them approach Sharon, their expressions serious and unyielding. "Miss Newman," one of the officers said, stepping forward, "we need you to stay here. We have some questions for you." Sharon froze, her face paling as the reality of the situation hit her. There was no more running, no more hiding. The truth had finally caught up with her. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the officers surrounded her, and Daniel and Lucy stood still, their eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. "What's going on?" Lucy whispered, her voice barely audible as she clung to Daniel's side. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. He was too focused on the officer's next move. "We've found evidence, Miss Newman," the officer continued, his voice steady but firm. "We need to discuss the necklace found in your car. It belongs to Heather, doesn't it?" Sharon's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't expected this. How had they found the necklace? Her hands trembled as she tried to find the words to respond, but none came. The truth was out, and there was no more hiding. "Miss Newman," the officer pressed, "your car's dashcam footage also shows you carrying what appeared to be a bloodied bag near the river where Heather's body was found. We need you to explain this." The crowd gasped. People exchanged shocked glances, murmurs rippling through the room as they tried to comprehend what was happening. Daniel felt a wave of nausea wash over him. The police had found damning evidence, and there was no escaping it now. Sharon looked down, tears streaming down her face as the realization of her fate set in. There was no way out of this. She had been caught. I didn't mean for it to happen," Sharon finally stammered, her voice shaking. "It was an accident. I never meant to kill her." Her confession sent shockwaves through the room. Gasps echoed around them as the mourners struggled to process what they were hearing. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest, his mind reeling. He had suspected Sharon was involved, but hearing her confess, right there, in front of everyone, was almost too much to bear. The officer stepped closer. "You need to tell us everything, Sharon. Why were you at the scene where we found Heather's body?" Sharon wiped her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "I went there to meet her. We argued. Things got out of hand. She fell. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. The room was deathly silent as everyone listened to her words, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. Sharon, once a beloved figure in Genoa City, had just admitted to killing Heather in a fit of rage. The enormity of her confession hung in the air, suffocating those who had once loved and trusted her.